Blessings, beloveds. So this is going to be part 2 about the ingress of the Venus Libra Star Point. Yesterday I did a video on the Libra Venus Star Point, and there's quite a bit of information on that one. So if you haven't seen that one, feel free to check it out. This is part 2, where I will be focusing on the aspects that this Venus Star Point has. Not all of them, because there's quite a few, including some outer bodies that correspond to really large cycles. And so I'm not going to cover every single aspect, but there's just 2 or 3 that I'd like to bring into focus for us to consider when we're thinking about this Libra Venus Star Point, which once again is a spectacular opportunity for us to be here on the planet while this phenomena occurs. So also, I just want to say thank you to those of you who did watch the video that I posted yesterday, and for all your comments, compliments, questions, everything that has been written underneath that video. I appreciate your input and that you've watched the video, so thank you for that. And yes, I will most likely come back and do another video with the Venus Star Point being conjunct any of the planets in our birth chart, right? I'll do my best to come back and do that probably in December, I would say, because I've just got some things that I need to. I'm taking some time off in November as well, as I've recently said. Anyway, let's get into today. So it's quite an interesting picture, actually, because we have the Venus Star Point in Libra, which took place yesterday. We have some of the aspects that are connected to that Venus Star Point, which will be the focus for today. And then in a few days' time, we'll actually, not even in a few days, it'll actually be tomorrow, we have the Scorpio solar eclipse. So, there's some really interesting signatures and phenomena taking place at the moment with the themes around transformation, metamorphosis, death, rebirth, and those words clearly connect to Scorpio and Pluto. So we kind of need to think about this Venus Star Point because she's just been reborn as an evening star, which means she's furthest from the earth and hidden because of the sun's light as well. It is said that she, as an evening star, she corresponds very closely to the archetype of Libra. And she takes us into the celestial and cerebral, mystical, esoteric, spiritual components of our psyche and our experiences. Whereas the morning star enables us to be more embodied in our body and in the physical senses and the earthly matters, as it were, right? Because the morning star is more closely aligned with the archetype of Taurus. So Venus rules Libra, she rules Taurus. As a morning star, she's more a Taurus type of energy. As an evening star, she's more of a Libran type of energy. Now, this Libra Venus Star Point, first of all, it is Venus. Venus rules Libra. So she's highly dignified in this placement, and really does speak to relationships in the most powerful way, really, because it is Venus, which is a body that corresponds to relationships, and it is Libra that she forms the evening star in, which is an archetype that also corresponds to relationships. So it's a double signature from that perspective. But first, I think it's important to also consider that the matter of relationships is so much of what this life is about. Our experience here on this earth plane is so connected to relationships. Whether we get married or not, or whether we have 5 relationships or 10 relationships, that's neither here nor there. That's not the issue. The matter is that we are constantly relating to the world around us, to our life experiences, to our family, to our loved ones, to lovers, to friends. Venus actually is the body that speaks to these experiences of relating. And particularly in Libra, she highlights that process of when we are relating with somebody, we are typically drawn and attracted to a particular individual because it is often the case that we are projecting something onto that person that we want from them. We think we need it and want it from that person. And so we're attracted to them for that reason. Sometimes there are some conscious components to that, like I'm so attracted to this person because they are, they have this great character. I love how independent they are. Or I'm really attracted to this person because they're so nurturing, they're so empathetic, they're so sensitive, whatever it is. All the different types of qualities that we identify in another, including the ones that repulse us as well. The ones that when we see certain things in another that we don't necessarily like, these are all aspects of the mirror, Libra, reflecting back to us things that we are either unconscious about, and the mirror reflects it back to us so that we can realize ourselves, the different facets of who we are, who we are becoming, where do we need to grow more, what are our blind spots, what is that mirror reflecting back to us, why is it reflecting that? Sometimes somebody can reflect something back to you that can just be so enlightening in a moment because it is something about yourself that you are not able to see. And the person opposite you, Libra, is the mirror, that they are literally reflecting back like a mirror something about yourself. Sometimes that will come through a direct comment. Sometimes it'll come through their behavior, their emotional responses, whatever it is, right? So everyone's got something to teach us. That's the mirror, that's Libra. So this Venus star point in Libra, whilst it speaks to a cycle that's going to go for 100 years, in the smaller sort of frame or process of this, particularly over the next 8 years, it is a new beginning, a new birthing of a new paradigm of love, for sure. And I don't mean romantic love necessarily, although Venus is romantic love as well. But I'm really specifically referring to the core love inside us that is, I believe, is 100% linked to the divine source creation from which we have emerged through, right? And that experience of unconditional love, which every single person wants, and we typically want it from another, right? but unconditional love is in our human experience is not an easy thing to give or to experience. I just feel after so many years of doing so much work on my own self, I've got a Venus Pluto aspect in my chart, a hard aspect, and this Venus Libra Star Point has a square to Pluto, which is why I'm bringing this comment in. The journey of being involved in many different relationships, really intense relationships, losing people, loving people so much, so intensely, having all these different experiences has really brought me to a place at this point in my life of really understanding what unconditional love really feels like inside me, right? And that everything that I have projected onto another, desired from another, saw in another, have all been aspects of my own self that have either been completely unconscious, that I have suppressed or denied or not understood or whatever it's been. And so over many, 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 many years of working through these different experiences and themes and heartache and lust and desire and all of that, and particularly the last 7 years, because I've been single for 7 years now, which is a long time, the Venus Pluto energy in my own chart has really taken me through the deepest transformative process of death and losing the one soul that I have loved the most, which was my father, and what that has meant, and the amount of shadow work and diving deep into feeling like I wanted to die myself, when my father transcended, right? Just those, and this has been going on for 7 years, right? It started before my father left because I could see what was coming. And there's a lot of details to this whole story, which I'm not going to go into, but it started about 7 years ago. And 7 years is a Saturn cycle as well. It's part of Saturn's 29-year cycle. Every 7 years, the expression 7-year itch comes from Saturn's cycle. So typically when we have a 7-year cycle of a particular theme or experience or chapter in our life, something completes after 7 years about that, right? So this Venus Libra Star Point is going to give birth to a new paradigm of love internally and on the planet as well. Let me just actually bring up the chart so that we could have a look-see together. Okay, so let's go here. So this is the Libra Venus Star Point that occurred yesterday. And I just want to just quickly highlight a couple of aspects and then make some comments on them. So here is the square from Pluto to the Venus Star Point. We also have a trine from Mars, which is really quite fascinating to me. Now, Mars is going to go stationary retrograde soon, the end of this month. And so for for the ingress chart of the Venus Libra Star Point, Mars is still moving direct. It is moving very slowly, but it's still in direct motion. So that's an interesting point there. And I'll unpack a few thoughts that I have about that in a minute. I just also want to say that Vesta, here is the goddess Vesta at 24 degrees of Aquarius. She's also trine this Venus star point. I mean, we could say it's a grand trine between the Venus star point, Mars, and Vesta. The closest aspect, however, is the square from Pluto. We also have goddess Eris, basically opposite this Venus star point. There are some other bodies like Sedna and Haumea, the Hawaiian goddess of birth, rebirth, and so forth, that is also involved in this picture, but I'm not going to speak to those archetypes today. I'm going to speak to these ones that I've highlighted here. Vesta is the daughter of Saturn, and remember in myth, she was the first one to be swallowed by Kronos, by Saturn, when he swallowed all his children. The first one to go in and the last one to come out. So she spent the longest time hidden, which is a really powerful symbolic metaphor for the depths and mysteries surrounding this archetype called Vesta or Hestia in Greek. And just a few key words to prompt our memory of what she symbolizes. She symbolizes devotion, focus, service, and what we invest our energy into. But typically, if I was to encapsulate her essence in just a few words, I would say that she is the archetype that really enables us and assists us in the soul work that we are here to do, consciously or unconsciously. So here she is in Aquarius, forming a trine to Mars and a trine to this Venus star point. And I just want to read something that I wrote about Vesta in relation to this Venus star point just a couple of days ago. So we're talking about air because Vesta is in Aquarius and the Libran star point is in Libra and Mars is in Gemini. So that's the trinity of the air signs in this harmonious grand trine, right? And air seeks to express through knowledge, wisdom, ideas, education, etc. It's the air quality is the quality that corresponds to our mind, to consciousness, to wisdom, to philosophy, to ideas, cosmological orientation. It's how we develop and evolve and form ideas and understanding through our thinking, right? That can include both left and right brain, although right brain is more intuitive based, but still we have components of our right brain which form ideas, knowledge through the left brain, Gemini, and then we kind of see them through the right brain by an intuitive connection and establish and develop something called meaning, Sagittarius. So we obtain the knowledge by reading something, studying something, and then we bring it over to our right brain to find the meaning to this. It's one thing to have read 100 books, and it's another thing to have meaning come out of that body of knowledge that you've absorbed in your consciousness, in your mind. So the trinity of air really takes us into that sphere of intelligence, wisdom, and so forth, right? So Hestia, which is Vesta, embodied the meaning of honest and faithful dealings. Hence, her name was used to seal oaths and social contracts. And I think that's a really important point here, because she's in Aquarius here, and Aquarius is certainly the archetype that corresponds to humanity, community, fairness, justice, equality. Libra also corresponds to fairness, justice, equality, and Gemini would be the air part of this trinity that brings in the information, the studying, the ideas, the knowledge, the reading, the absorbing, the connecting the dots, right? And so I think Aquarius here for Vesta is highlighting the necessary justice and equality that needs to be integrated in a very meaningful, honest, and authentic way moving forward into the future of this life, because we have witnessed over a very long period of time severe injustices and inequality and unfairness that's been going on forever, so to speak, right? So there's something very important here about Vesta forming a trine to this Venus Libra Star Point that really brings in, because Venus as well is about the values in society, for instance, our own personal values and what we value out there in society, in communities, in culture, whatever, right? So Vesta in Aquarius is highlighting through her specific connection to sealing oaths and social contracts. She's a goddess that connects to those themes. And I think the fact that Pluto is also ingressing into Aquarius next year, just very briefly before it goes back into Capricorn again, is just intensifying these new evolutionary journeys that we will go through collectively and personally around community, humanity, fairness, justice, and equality, right? So there's Vesta's opening this portal that is enabling us to step into that very privately and personally for ourselves, because Vesta is a very private body, a very private portal. Vesta is, because she's so mysterious and so hidden, if you like, it's not necessarily what we do on a public level. It can be, because, you know, she can correspond to being an advocate for social injustices and things like that, for instance. But it just comes back to our own sense of consciousness and our own ability to be more aware and more objective. When we're talking about the quality of air, which is a trinity that's emphasized with this Venus star point, we're talking about objectivity and clarity and awareness, as opposed to being subjective, you know, in our own biases and ideas and so forth, right? So I just wanted to just close that down so it doesn't interfere. I just wanted to highlight that I think Vesta's presence here is really important. Furthermore, outside of the social collective sphere, Vesta forming a trine to this Venus star point and to Mars is an indication as well of the perhaps the investment that we need to do around our true deep exploration of self-worth, Venus, self-love, Venus. And why is that so important? Because every relationship we have and every person we're attracted to or think we want to be with, or we want this from that person, or we want that from that person, or we want this from this relationship, a lot of that is projected unconsciously. And, you know, that's necessary in a lot of ways as well, because that's how we learn about ourselves and about our own worth and value, and indeed what we do value, and how much our self-worth is in check. You know, what is self-love? You know, what does that mean to us? How do we practice that? How do we embody that? How do we express that? Those questions are very, very important, because the more we don't work deeply within ourself around matters of self-worth and self-love, the more we're going to project what we think we need and want from others. And so the classic result and ending of that is inevitable in the way that it will basically be that you'll soon discover that that person, that relationship, won't give you that thing that you want, because it can't. It has to come from within you. It has to come from within ourselves. We have to find those things that we think we need from others. And it can be, you know, it's such a wide spectrum, you know, because there are practical needs, there are emotional needs, there are things that inspire us, there are things that speak to what we think we are lacking in, and so that person has it. So boom, you know, here I am attracted to that person because they have something that I don't have, but I can experience it through that person. And that's why we draw those people in, because they will eventually just show to us that they cannot give that to us. It's something that we need to find in ourselves. And these themes are all huge with this Venus star point in Libra, because Libra is that experience that we have of the mirror, relationships reflecting back to us these components, unconscious components of ourselves. And the more we can have these experiences, and the more we do, and the more we can be honest and authentic and embody what we are learning and develop greater insight and understanding, the more we can actually give to ourselves what we actually need, as opposed to seeking it from outside of ourselves. Anything we seek outside of ourselves is never 100% secure. It's not permanent. It's never 100% secure. And if it is somebody giving you something, they can actually just step back and pull it from under your feet like that at any time. That's kind of like an element of Libra, we could say. That's the shadow side that could speak to codependence, for instance, because Libra has such a strong need to relate and to share and to be in relationship with another, that the extreme of the imbalance that can occur in the Libran archetype, so relationships, is the severe sort of projection of, I want to be with this person, I need this relationship, I want this relationship, they've got everything that I'm looking for, they've got everything that I need, you know. And so therein begins this sort of codependency, you know. And what happens when that person pulls away? That the other person is left feeling like the rug has been pulled from under their feet, because they haven't done the work around sustaining and cultivating inner security, worth and value and self-love. So the Libra and Venus Star Point is going to teach us more on these themes as well. It is about all those things I spoke about yesterday relative to love, peace, beauty, harmony, music, the arts, the necessary balance that needs to be integrated into humanity at the moment on the earth plane, and many other things that I mentioned. It is all of that, but today I wanted to go again just a little bit deeper into some of the themes that we can think about from a personal perspective and how this is going to work for us, as it were. Again, it's going to depend on what this Venus Star Point aspects in your own birth chart and the house that it's in. That's going to add a lot of colors and shades to the journey of the Venus Libra Star Point for you. But the matters and themes that I've touched on today are the core essential themes that are there underneath all the other layers and shades, right? So I just want to say that with the trine to Mars, I see that as a really promising configuration from the point of view of our future moving forward, and the necessary balance as well with man, woman, female, male, feminine, masculine. Now, fundamentally, the feminine and masculine exist within all of us, regardless of our gender. That's the baseline, as it were. However, we do also have human beings that are either a woman or a man, and I realize there's this gender fluidity that is something that's evolving on the earth at the moment, with different preferences that people have and so forth. And I'm not an expert in those experiences, and I'm not going to talk about them as if I am. I'm just simply acknowledging that I'm aware that there's this field at the moment that speaks to what's termed as gender fluidity, right? In any case, I still feel that wherever someone is on that spectrum, or whether you are, a straight heterosexual male or a straight heterosexual female, in anywhere we are within that, the feminine and masculine is always something that is within us, regardless of how we identify. So when we have Mars, which is the symbol for masculinity, and Venus, the symbol for femininity, and in myth, Mars and Venus were the most it's one of the most common or popular love stories and myths, when you go back into mythology, the love and passion between Mars and Venus. They used to fight a lot and, come back together and leave, and there were other lovers that came in between, and there was this, and there was jealousies, and there was lots of really interesting stories of Mars and Venus. So when you see Mars and Venus forming a trine together, it is speaking to an energy of unison, and it's two air signs, so that's what forms a trine aspect. And a trine aspect is an energy that doesn't resist. It just naturally flows and connects. So to see Mars and Venus forming a trine here is an indication to us from the point of view of divine feminine, divine masculine within all of us, is stepping into a new paradigm where a harmonious frame or path is implied with this trine aspect. And I think that's a really important point, because there's been so much imbalance in this physical experience over, you know, thousands of years actually, where, you know, we've had a dominance of the masculine, and then we've had the feminine in as seen through women on the earth plane at different points in history. You know, women fighting for their rights, for example, women fighting for their right to vote, or their right to work, or their right for this, or their right for that, you know, trying to bring in, right, an equal plane, an equal field for both men and women, right? Because there's just been such an imbalance on the external field of things, right? So, and historically, as I said, there's been, you know, incredibly powerful feminine archetypes, women that have come through and have been, you know, advocates and heroines, you know, for being the face of this and that and the other, right, in order to establish some kind of fairness on those external planes. We've also seen, you know, I would say, particularly in the last 15 years, I've noticed this anyway, I'm sure all of you have, I've seen a lot more of men being more in touch with their feminine side in very obvious ways, and even just things like seeing a guy having a baby, you know, having one of those wraps, you know, when you have a small baby, you can buy this kind of like a baby seat that you attach to your body, right? And I see so many men, you know, walking around with that baby, you know, in that little harness and just attached to their chest, and they're just walking. You know, 20 years ago, you would never see that. Just wasn't heard of. You know, you see men with taking their babies for a walk in a pram now. You wouldn't have seen that 20, 30 years ago. So there's been a lot of changes in the roles of feminine and masculine. And we are clearly going through lots of transformations and evolutionary processes within those fields, those dynamics, those expressions, right? And what is the right sort of path or way around what men should be doing or what women should be doing? It's a tough one. It's a tough debate, and I know a lot of people are going to have a lot of different views and perspectives and beliefs and you know, thoughts around that, right? But I guess we can't really deny what's inherent in biology and nature. The fact is that the masculine principle is wired to take action and create and sort of do things on that external plane. That's not to say that they are not sensitive or feminine or have empathy, or, you know, it's not to say any of that. But the masculine force pushes us out. The feminine force or frequency takes us in. You know, it's just nature and biology and just how energy works in those ways. Because particularly in a third dimension reality, we live in a physical reality, regardless of our spiritual life, emotional body, sensitivities, internal world experiences that we have internally, we still live in a physical body, in a physical reality, which is duality, right? Duality is the absolute expression of life here on this earth plane. That's why we have day, night, yin, yang, hot, cold, etc., right? Duality is part of our experience here. So Mars forming a trine to this Venus star point, I think, is a very hopeful indication for a lot more balance coming in to the, again, divine feminine, divine masculine. There's a harmonious prospect here with this energy. And because it's in air signs as well, it says that moving forward as we evolve and as we bring in more harmony in the divine feminine, divine masculine within us, we will create that harmony and that peace specifically through new understanding and new communication and new ideas and new knowledge, and being able to talk about things a lot more than we have previously, although that's something that has really changed a lot through the years as well. There's so much more accessible and available now, you know, men's groups doing this, women's groups doing that, and sort of creating space for conversations and healing to happen for all types of groups of people, right? You know, the world of psychology, psychotherapy, etc., being, you know, nowadays we have, for example, football players, you know, who will openly share that they've just had, you know, therapy for the last 6 months, whereas, you know, 20 years ago you wouldn't have even heard of that necessarily, right? So there's a lot more openness about the need actually for the divine masculine to also be given a space to express their experience and their journey, or that part in us, the divine masculine, having sort of an outlet and a voice. If you're a man, then your own divine masculine, and how that is nurtured, cultivated, and understood, right? So I see a really beautiful, potential, harmonious path that brings a greater balance of the feminine and the masculine, period. That's what I see with this Mars there. Now, when we bring in Pluto, that, you know, changes the dynamics a little bit, and we can't ignore Pluto. It is actually the closer aspect as well. Now, Pluto is another story. I think in combination with everything that I've pointed to, I think what we are looking at with Pluto's presence is a lot more intensity and a lot more desire to work out our own feelings, why I feel the way I feel, why I feel that way about this person. It's a deep, deep, deep journey into the underworld, for sure, because Pluto is a symbol of the underworld. And the evening star, she's in the underworld as well at the moment. You know, Venus is furthest from the earth, hidden by the sun, occulted, obscured, whatever word you want to use. And then we've got a Scorpio solar eclipse coming up a couple of days after this. So there's clearly an invitation as well around our commitment to exploring our own deep love, and looking at our personal limitations and fears and resistances as well. Pluto Venus aspects are, I'd have to say, is one of the most fascinating aspects to me, and doesn't really matter what aspect it is. Of course, each aspect has a different characteristics to it, and certainly a square aspect is incredibly dynamic, and can be very conflicting as well. And I think the conflict arises when we have resistance to dying to perhaps our old conditioned perspectives on love and relationships. Because when we go into the bigger picture of what has been instilled into humanity for thousands of years, has been a model that speaks to the traditional, conventional, husband, wife, meeting somebody and just getting married and staying with them for the rest of your life. And that model has been ingrained in people's psyches as being that's the right way to do things. That's the correct path. That's what everyone should be doing. That's the norm, and so on and so forth. And the truth of the matter is that model doesn't work for most people. And the result of the pressure of needing to conform to that model and believe that that's what a relationship or relationships need to be or should look like, puts enormous pressure on people to stay in a situation that is unhealthy, where they are no longer growing, where they are stagnant, where they are no longer being challenged, just for the sake of saving face, as it were, showing that, yes, I'm married, I'm still married, my marriage is successful, and so on and so forth. There seems to be, still a lot of shame or stigma around what people view as a failed marriage. That's a very complex subject as well. But I think with Pluto squaring the Venus star point here, we're going to undergo some rude awakenings, perhaps, or very deep processes of growth and transformation in our perception of love, relating, and relationships, and certainly our own ability to love ourselves is primary here. It's key. It's at a more challenging level, let's say, this is indicative of pretty intense, sometimes cataclysmic type of situations in relationships where, some relationships will just come to a complete end, as it were, and it'll literally feel like a death for a lot of people, because it is. When a relationship ends, it is an ending, isn't it? What is an ending? It's a death. What's a death? It's an ending. So that's why when a relationship ends, for a lot of people, it's usually quite a painful experience, because it's a death, and death feels painful to us when something finishes. But death and birth, they're kind of like they're the same coin. right? You just turn it around, you have two different faces on the same coin. They're at the same, they belong to the same spectrum. You can't have one without the other. So when we have these deep experiences of losing someone or finishing something, it is always going to be followed with some kind of new beginning, whatever that is, right? I guess that's the thing that can sometimes give us some hope and some comfort when we're going through something really, really difficult that we need to let go of and release, which is the part of us in our human form that becomes attached, right? Attachment, which is Taurus. So I think Pluto squaring Venus here is an indication of our relationships really transforming, over the many years to come, and even more importantly, our own idea of relationships and our own idea around love, and getting to the heart and the soul. Pluto Venus Star Point gets to the heart and soul of things as well, of this love that we are seeking outside of ourselves, getting to the heart and soul of that within ourselves. Because that then implies self-empowerment, integration, embodiment, understanding, valuing, worthing, and honoring our divine self. And when we have some sense of that, and we've done work on that, and we bring that into a relationship, the relationship has got a far greater chance to succeed in longevity and in a path that is complementary, if you like, that enables both souls to grow individually and within the relationship. Less jealousies and angers and unconscious projections and and expectations, and I expected this from you and I needed this from you and I didn't get that from you and blah blah blah, right? Because ultimately Venus is the goddess of love, but she's also the goddess of love that teaches us about self-love. So the Pluto squaring this Venus star point I feel is going to teach us a lot about the deep journey of self-love, which is a pathway that takes us into the underworld, the unconscious, coming face to face with what we fear, with our own perceived personal limitations, what is triggered in us through relationship, the mirror, the things that are triggered inside us, that the more we can inquire about those things, be curious, feel our way into it, ask questions, sit, reflect, ponder, and so forth. That's called doing work on yourself. Because the opposite to that is to take no ownership, no accountability for the misery or unhappiness or dissatisfaction we may be feeling in our life around the experience of relationships, because we just see that person is to blame. It's their fault. I'm unhappy. I'm miserable. It's because he did that, or it's because she didn't do this, and so on and so forth. But that's just a position of victimhood, disempowerment, no ability to be accountable and responsible for what we feel ourselves. At the end of the day, the truth of the matter is no matter how uncomfortable somebody might make us feel, or how much they upset us or piss us off or whatever it is, we are responsible for that state that gets disrupted inside us, for the feelings that rise out of those sorts of experiences. And there's nothing more powerful than really understanding that, because once you understand that, you empower yourself immediately. Because saying that I'm devastated because this person did this and that person did that and blah, blah, blah. And so now what have you done there? You've given all your power over to that other person, saying to them, here you go, here's all my power. And so now I'm like, my happiness is in your hands. I can't be happy unless you behave this way or unless you do this. I mean, really, how disempowered is that position to be in? To think that somebody else is responsible for your happiness. They're not. I think these are the themes that are going to go very deep with Pluto squaring Venus here. We're going to be given the opportunity to examine our own worth, self-love, value, and how are we relating to others? How are we evolving and growing in ourselves in any relationship we are in? You know, are we just putting all these expectations onto the other? You know, being accountable and responsible for how we feel is a huge place of empowerment. And Pluto is the planet of self-empowerment. It is also the planet of disempowerment. That's what Pluto speaks to. It speaks to journeys that we go through where at times we might feel completely self-empowered, and at other times we might feel completely disempowered. And both those journeys and processes are necessary and part of our growth, to recognize what we are ready to discard, what we are needing to further develop and cultivate and understand. So you can't know what it's like to be cold if you haven't felt hot, just to use a simple example. So it's the process of duality, of meeting and feeling all these different things in order to realize and notice and be more aware of just how far we have evolved, or how conscious we are in how we are participating in relationships in relation to others. And Libra is a wonderful teacher for perhaps gifting us the ability to bring in that greater harmony and balance, you know, in all our relationships. But on the other hand, I just want to point out as well that it seems to me that people assume that Libra just symbolizes balance and harmony, and she does. But when we're talking about integrating a journey or a process through the Libran archetype, we are working at that balance. It doesn't automatically just show up because it's Libra. It's something that we need to come to understand. We need to identify and recognize where there is imbalance and where we do need to bring more balance in. And it's like a testing field, you know. We're stepping over there a little bit. Oops, I've gone a little bit too far, or I've gone a little bit too high, and that's actually made that scale go somewhere down here. So how do I bring those scales kind of back up to be at that middle ground where things feel more harmonious and more balanced? You know, we're always kind of testing and working on things and working it out, right, within ourselves. And it is the relationships which are the mirror that help us experience that and navigate that journey. And however we evolve. It's a different, experience and process for all of us. But Pluto square the Venus star point is certainly a reflection from a collective sphere of the necessary transformation that needs to happen on the earth with the matters of peace, harmony, balance, justice, fairness, equality, love, self-worth, self-value, the necessary transformation that needs to happen on those core elements in ourself and therefore in life, because of the extreme imbalance that has been cultivated over a long time. So I think Pluto's presence there is indicative that all of us here on the planet at the moment, from a soul level, really need to transform our idea of love and work more deeply at our own self-worth and self-love. I can't emphasize that enough, because that in turn becomes what we project onto others and into relationship. So Pluto's presence is saying, from a soul level, individually and collectively, we are working very intensely from a soul level to bring in a greater sense of harmony and peace and beauty and balance within ourselves through the divine feminine, divine masculine, and therefore then what we see on the earth, because everything that we see on the earth is just a projection of our own psyche, of our own thoughts, of our own feelings, of our own ideas, of our own biases, of our own so-called morals, righteous position, whatever. Everything we see, perceive out there is a creation that has been born out of us, every single one of us. So Pluto here is saying we need to transform, like really from a soul level, what's been, and we are ready now for a completely new understanding around the importance of what real love is about. Not this well, how can I put it? Because of all the imbalances that have been accumulated over a long time, and because of the heavy masculine dominance over the earth, excuse me, and then the feminine coming through saying, oh, hang on a minute, this has just gone a little bit too far. Let me just bring it back to being of some equal pathway, right? And so this is where Eris comes in, actually. I heard a fellow astrologer talk about, and I want to credit this to her, and I've just forgotten how to say her name. So let me just find her name. She does a lot of work on the Venus, the the cycle of Venus, you know, as Venus becomes the morning star, the evening star, and the journey in between that, which corresponds to the myth of Inanna, and who's also Venus, and the descent into the underworld. I just heard her say today that, and I must credit this to her. Her name is Damaskana Tanis, and she's on Facebook, so you can find her there. She's from America. She's a lovely, lovely lady, and she's really great with the Venus work as well. Anyway, I hadn't heard anyone say this before, so it just felt right when I heard her say this. So Inanna had the dark sister, right? How do you say her name? Eris. And the story of Inanna is quite complex. There's all these layers, you know. She's got to go through all these spheres and levels where she, you know, departs with a particular piece of jewelry or piece of clothing, you know, as she goes through each sphere and level, which is our own. It's a metaphor for our journey of going into the underworld. You know, that is there's many different steps and stages, and that could be, for example, that could be a relationship, you know, where you meet somebody, then you have like, you know, you have a period of lust and passion, whatever, and then you're at another stage in that relationship, and suddenly, you know, you're being triggered, and you're triggering them, and so all these things are born out of those triggers, things that you didn't realize about yourself or about the other person, and then you go to another stage where there's some conflict and some you know, whatever it is, and then long story short, you come to the end, as it were. That's a cycle of some kind of relationship, right? In this case, we're using an example of two people, for instance. But the Inanna story is our own divine feminine needing to shed and remove what's no longer needed, because we've evolved, we've outgrown it, we've learnt, we've gained the insight. But it's a death process, because that descent into the underworld is a death process, right? Anyway, when she's down at the bottom, somewhere there, having a meeting with her sister, Eris, who's the dark sister, who eventually killed her, you know, hung her on a hook or something like that. The character Eris, who's the dark evil sister, and this is what Damaskana brought to my attention today. Eris is always in this one spot in the myth, and it's always down there at the bottom, in the dark, in the underworld sort of base level. You know, you can't go any further. She's just there in the myth. She's always just at this one spot. And so what Damaskana said today was that Eris, goddess Eris, is a really interesting archetype to correspond to this Erisial figure. And her reasoning behind that, which I think is fair actually, is that Eris will be in Aries for every single person on the planet here at the moment. We're all born with Eris in Aries, and she, I don't know when she gets out of Aries. It's many years down the track. Some of us may still be alive, and many of us won't. But in any case, all of us are born with the goddess Eris in Aries, and we'll never see the change of that sign, most likely, because she spends, what's her cycle? It's over 500 years, something, you know, really sort of, we can't even, left brain, we can't even conceive that, right? So anyway, the point is that she's always in the one sign for all of us. And that's a reflection of Eris being in that one spot, in that underworld story, if you like, mirroring back to us, those darker shades of ourself. Dark, it doesn't mean bad or wrong. It's only the mind that splits things up and, thinks that the light is good and the dark is bad, so to speak. But there's dark and light in everything and everyone. So, Eris, who's come in as quite a fierce force over the last few years because she's been squaring Pluto and has created, a lot of chaos on the earth. We've experienced it as chaos, but it's been the necessary clearing that has come through in a very cataclysmic way. And it has brought up a lot of dark things that have needed to be exposed. The amount of systems, individuals, groups that have been exposed over the last 2.5 years is more than I think we've seen in our lifetime, at least, right? Because it's been over a 2.5-year period. It's been so intense, and there's just so much that's exposed, things that we had no idea about, really, really dark things, speaking to violation, of human rights and sexual violation and children, and, there's a lot of things that have come to light, and that's Eris, basically saying, well, okay, let's let me just shake it up a little bit over here and just, bring it up to the surface, because when we are unconscious and operating from a darker shade, darker level that may have an evil tone to it, we need to eventually wake up out of that, and so Eris exposes a lot of things that have been going on for quite some time that are very unpleasant. Most people still turn a blind eye to. But it is the darker side. And the point is, look, she's the darker sister of Inanna, okay? And it's just an aspect of ourself, okay, that we are completely out of touch with. And when we are out of touch with something, what do? We just see it out there. Oh, that's the bad person. That's the dark person. That's the person who, is not good, did this, did that, yada, 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 right? Until, Carl Jung said it, until we make the unconscious conscious, we'll project it outside of ourselves and we'll see it as fate. So all the implications here, we've got two masculine planets, Pluto, Mars. I want to say Pluto's not necessarily masculine, but it is a planet of will, and willpower does correspond to the masculine frequency. So therefore we could say, yes, it has a component to it that can be defined through masculine energy, right? So perhaps I'll just say two planets of willpower, and two planets of desire. One planet being Pluto, speaking to the highest will and the soul's desires, and Mars being the lower will and the personality desires. And so both these planets which are actually quincunx each other, are forming a very significant aspect to the Venus Star Point. And perhaps the quincunx between Mars and Pluto will be the necessary adjustment, because quincunxes always speak to adjustment and also separating and leaving something behind. So adjustment towards this new paradigm of love that is born, and how we are going to participate in that. And also what we might leave behind from our lower desires and our lower will, so that we can actually evolve further into the soul's desires and will consciously, to again bring through, well, Venus has already brought through this new paradigm of love. It is us that need to embrace that, integrate that, embody that work, and consciously work on that as we continue to evolve forward in this life and in this world. And Vesta being trine, this Venus star point, suggesting the importance of devotion and focus and investment on on all these themes that I've spoken about, essentially. Okay, so let me see. And I just want to say with Eris, whether we see her as Erixual or not, she is a dark feminine archetype that does bring discord and chaos, but she brings it because she is mirroring back the dark components of our own psyche that we are completely fucking unconscious about, basically, right? So being opposite the Venus star point, oppositions bring in illumination, consciousness, awareness, objectivity, clarity, seeing. So her opposition to this Venus star point is extremely profound as well, because it's saying that we will perhaps be able to become more integrated with our own shadow, unconscious, dark components that we are so out of touch with that the only way we can experience them is by seeing them out there. That's what she's pointing to, waking up to our own darkness and working with that instead of projecting it. Once we accept our own darkness, as it were, unconscious components, understand them, we just don't have that need to project it anymore. We become more whole and more integrated, embodied, aware, conscious, awake. So that's what I see with this Venus star point, being the star of the show, as it were, being the light of this cosmic love and unison that needs to be integrated. And all these other archetypes that are there, Eris, Pluto, Mars, speak to the necessity of the things that I've pointed to regarding those archetypes anyway, and Vesta. So again, as I said at the beginning, there are some other archetypes forming aspects to this Venus star point, such as I think it's Sedna and Haumea. And yes, we could add a couple of other layers with those, but this is what I really wanted to cover today was what I have covered. So I'm going to come back with Ariel. I just don't know when it's going to be, so we'll see when that happens. But this is my personal but objective sense of the overall energy of this Venus star point and the importance of these themes when we sort of, create a future trajectory with these energies, because these energies that are in play with the Venus Libra star point, they will be carried through in some way with this Venus star point. Just like when you have a new moon, for example, and the new moon, let's say it's conjunct Chiron, well, that lunation for the month, in some way, shape, or form, it's going to carry the energy of that archetype of Chiron, because it started, the inception, the birth of that new moon started with Chiron right there with it. So the moon, she's going to carry that Chiron energy with her as she completes her whole cycle to come back to being reborn as a new moon again. Well, it's the same principle. You know, we have a Venus star point. She's born as an evening star through the conjunction she makes to the sun, and being furthest from the earth at the moment, which is why it's a direct movement. We see a Sun-Venus conjunction every 9 months or so, and one is an evening star and one is a morning star, right? So Venus does this incredible journey, we could say, you know, in just to keep it simple, you know, over 9 months or so, nine and a half months. She does this journey where she travels closest to the earth, which is when she's retrograde. She is closest to us, so we feel her frequency physically, let's say, a lot more. And the matters of everything to do with Venus and the physicality of this experience, the focus on physical matters, and everything that the retrograde cycle takes us through as well, because we have our own personal journey with the Venus retrograde cycle, right? Depending on the sign it's in, depending on which house it's moving through, so on and so forth. And it's an interesting thing, because the retrograde journey is also an indication that we need to reflect on things as well. It is a time where we can make very clear decisions as well, but it is certainly a time of quite a lot of reflection going on, and that journey lasts for about 40 days, you know, quite a significant number, you know, historically from a spiritual perspective and so forth, you know, 40 days, 40 nights, you know, comes into matters of people passing, transcending, and so forth. There's lots of references to the number 40 spiritually. So, you know, that's what's going on with Venus. She's, you know, when she's retrograde, she's closest to us here on Earth. We have a different sort of experience and relationship and embodiment with her. And then she moves away, and she, you know, she separates from the sun, as it were. And so she moves through the zodiac, you know, and then eventually the sun catches up with her, you know, on the other side, as it were. And that's where she's the evening star. So the morning star is what they call the inferior conjunction, which is a retrograde cycle. And when she's on the other side, furthest away from us, it's the superior conjunction, as it's called, or exterior is another term you might hear, which is when she's furthest away from us. And that's when she descends into the underworld, because she's invisible. We can't see her. And so she does this cycle, you know, over 9.5 months, all the time. So we have these opportunities to go into the journey of Inanna and Venus with her journey through the underworld and being reborn. So that's pretty encouraging in a way, because when you become sort of in tune to that energy, it connects to the moon as well. That is Venus forming aspects to the moon, particularly a conjunction. There's quite a bit to this, and I've only recently started sort of really connecting with this Venus Inanna sort of underworld story and journey I've known about it for a very long time, but I've just gone into a different level of understanding and experience with it. And so as time goes on, I'll, you know, perhaps talk more about that in the future. But for the moment, I just wanted to highlight, what happens with this Venus star point, and where we're at in that cycle at the moment, which is the underworld, literally. And I just forgot to also mention that, which I feel I need to. Today, while I'm doing this video, the sun's moved into Scorpio, and so has Venus. So this is, this is pretty important, right? Because what we have here is we have Scorpio season's just started. Venus has been reborn as an evening star in Libra, and immediately within hours next day, goes into Scorpio, which is another symbol for the underworld. Tomorrow, 25th of October, we have the Scorpio solar eclipse. You can see that. Look at the moon. The moon's at 12 Libra, and so it's not going to take long before it gets to a couple of degrees of Scorpio. I think it's 2 degrees of Scorpio. It's got to reach 2 degrees of Scorpio. And there's the solar eclipse, which I've spoken about already. But when you think about everything that I've just said today and everything that I said yesterday, and think about the fact that we've just stepped into Scorpio season and Venus is in Scorpio, and there's a Scorpio solar eclipse coming, and Venus is furthest away from the Earth and she's in the underworld, it is, so clear that we are in a deeply profound transition in our own unconscious at the moment with the journey of Venus. That is our own divine feminine within, and all our relationships and our experiences in relationships and our understanding and our insight and our knowledge and our limitations and our fears and our wounds, everything is at a really critical point in our life because of the way these energies are all lining up. Solar eclipse, evening Venus star point, Venus in Scorpio, now Sun in Scorpio, it's obvious, right? So I might actually come back, and if I have time, I don't think I will, but I might just come back and talk about Venus in Scorpio, because there's a lot to say about her in that position. And I know there's a lot of Venus in Scorpios that watch my work here as well. And so let me know under the comments if you are a Venus in Scorpio. My Venus star point when I was born was in Scorpio. So yeah, I really I really feel that that energy in my own kind of way, because it's my Venus star point, which is the head of my pentagram, and that's a different thing to my natal Venus, for instance, which is not in Scorpio. So anyway, I'll see if I can come back and talk about that. And yeah, so leave your comments and thoughts below around the content that I shared today, and feel free to share this video and like and subscribe and so on and so forth. And see you guys very, very soon. Bye for now.